3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shop Stool Podcast. We are sitting down with another guest this week, all the way from Melbourne, down in Bryan's neck of the woods. He's also a recent new friend of ours that we got to hang out with for an entire weekend. And, you know, I think this is the first guest that we all know outside of the podcast. So I want to welcome to the show Patrick Holcombe. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Robin. And nice to see you guys again after a couple of weeks break.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll get into that meetup in a second. But for everyone who doesn't know you, what is it you do and how did you get to the place where you are now a woodworker?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a similar story a lot on this podcast. I'm a self-taught woodworker. I just kind of actually started out doing handyman stuff when the work I was doing from my actual degree just wasn't really fulfilling. And I was playing in a band and I needed a part-time job, so I just did some like basic building work.
What was the degree, Patrick? What did you study?
Botany and ecology.
Okay.
It was actually called natural resource management, so it's kind of like a parks ranger. The reality of that work, if you're not able to go away from a capital city, is you're pulling weeds and poisoning weeds and stuff, and it's just not exactly what I wanted to do. I was really into the research and the science, and anyway, I had some clients trust me to build them some pieces, and I just really concentrated on building up my portfolio, and I thought I was doing amazing woodwork when I really, really was not.
We all start there.
But, just worked hard to always push my abilities, would take on jobs that I didn't really know how to do, would always try and... I still put way more hours into a job than it's necessarily worth because I'm always keen to make sure that I'm handing off a piece to a client that I'm super proud of. And really it's just been kind of word of mouth since then. I moved out of my little back room of my house in 2016 and moved into this little factory in the industrial wasteland of Campbellfield, which is actually, it's been perfect, really. It's, it's a bit soulless, like it's not a beautiful old building like yours, Bryan, and it's not like tucked right in the city like, a couple of our other mates, but it has everything I need out here, and I'm surrounded by other makers and fabricators and suppliers, and it's... From a professional standpoint,
that's definitely
it's really,
one bonus. So you've got a welder next door or something, do you?
Right there, yeah.
So, that's handy.
Yeah. In a nutshell, that's my thing. I mean, I always, my dad made stuff. He was a English teacher, but he built our house and built all of our furniture and, our activities when we were kids were like, oh, here's a pile of metal, go weld that together, go make a mess. So I was just comfortable enough with tools for it to be a pretty natural transition. And when I got to a point where I was making pieces, it just felt so natural. Like I get to work with my hands, I get to make something, I enjoyed the process, and then I hand something off to a client and they're like, oh, that's lovely. And I get a little buzz, and then they give me money and I get to do it all over again. And it just seemed perfect. And coming from like the music world where I was doing all this creative work that I wasn't paid for, even though I wasn't being paid much for woodworking, it was like, hey, someone's paying me for my creativity. That's fantastic.
That is a beautiful summary of it.
The number of people that we've had on this show that are woodworkers who have been in bands is insane.
I was just going to ask you, Bryan,
you three got... No, mate, I haven't got a musical bone in my body.
Because all of us were in bands, and a bunch of people we've had on.
Simeon was a big band, yeah.
It's the only people who can survive on the pittance that we make are musos who can survive on less.
When you move into woodworking, you're like, Jesus, there's so much money in this game.
What a lucrative industry.
I'm nearly earning minimum wage.
It's interesting that I guess there's a pull for that kind of creativity, and music is a good release of your creativity. Is much harder to earn any money. And woodworking lets you release your creativity in a different way, but there's also a different amount of money involved, like Bryan said. So it's an interesting...
it's a similar kind of slightly oversaturated industry. Lots of people who are doing it while working full-time jobs. So like kind of subsidizing the products they're making. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of similarities in a way. But yeah, I mean, I've always been surprised by how many folks, you've had on have been in bands too.
Yeah.
So talk us through your workshop, Pat. What are you... I know the Mark Dana and Matt Black, when they were there, they came back from their tour of your shop, essentially drooling over some of the machines that you got.
I mean, yeah, from where I started in my back shed, if I'd seen this space, I would have been like, yep, that is absolutely perfect. And it really is. Like, it's 100 square meters concrete box on the floor, and I've got about 75 or more square meters up on a mezzanine. Half of that I rent out to Clancy, who was also at Wood Dust. I have rented out to other folks, and I keep half of it I use it for oiling and try and use it as a slightly cleaner space up there. And just extra storage space, really. But yeah, over the years, I've built up from, more like hobbyist tools to a couple of pretty decent industrial tools. And just recently upgraded a few bits and pieces, which just made my life a bit easier. And it's a really, I mean, I think you guys have probably all experienced, I mean, you just moved, Joey, but like, I know I'd love more space, but I also know realistically it would take, I'd have to really change my workflow to really need more space. Like, I can make this work. It'd be nice to have double, but that's just so I could be messier, I guess.
But the line where you start to have wasted space, I think, is often a lot closer than you think it is.
Yeah, and I think what would ultimately push me to a bigger space would be if I picked up a job for an architect where they're like, okay, we need 50 of these tables by the end of the year. I might rent a factory next door or something and just try and do that on like a rental basis. And if that worked, I could. But I actually I go back and forth, but I don't want to run a business with a whole bunch of employees. I value my freedom. I'm in a lucky position where I don't have a massive mortgage. I don't need to be making a heap of money. I'm quite happy having the kind of control. I want to be on the tools. Like, I love designing, but I also don't want to be the person who's just designing. So yeah, I'm good where I am for now.
I'm like nodding my way through everything you're saying. Like, it's like speaks to me exactly how I feel. So I'll just let you speak and assume I'm agreeing.
Oh, good.
How does it work having Clancy there? Do you guys utilize each other's skills and lifting and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Clancy's actually worked for me for about almost since 2016.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't realize he'd been there.
I looked for an employee really early on to help with, I can't remember exactly what I was doing. Oh, actually, at the early days, about half of my income was from set design. So I just needed someone else on site doing these big builds. And then half my income was furniture design. And Clancy was, I don't know what he was doing, but he worked for me a couple of days a week and kind of has on and off for the last couple of years. And it's been fantastic. It's kind of a pretty casual arrangement, but he's always run his own little business making bits and pieces. And yeah, we help each other out a lot. He can utilize my big tools when I'm not here. And I always, a couple times a day, he's down helping me lift something and turn it over. Yeah. It's so invaluable, as you guys know, having that extra pair of hands. Like the amount of times I've nearly dropped a table on myself because I've tried to lift it by myself or damage something because, including my back. Like, it's like the stuff we do is too heavy to do one person half the time.
Yeah.
I think we've always said that to people that are looking at expanding the amount of furniture they produce in the early stages, getting an informal relationship with somebody that you trust.
How difficult it is to do a lot of this stuff by yourself.
Yeah.
It's just invaluable.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that right now because
you dropped you don't have anyone else at the moment, do you?
No, I had to get rid of my guy, just from a money point of view. And I'm really struggling with just getting enough done, getting time on the computer, time in the workshop. But then I'm like, at the moment, this kind of harks back to what you were just saying about space. Is the only reason I need the space is because I take on these ridiculously giant full house loads of kitchen and scullery type stuff. And at the moment, I'm just full up with boxes and there's bloody nowhere to move. And I'm just like, keep looking at it going, I haven't actually thought about how I'm going to get this.
You kind of need
in
someone else
the
there
house.
just to get that stuff done, just get it out the door.
Yeah, so at the moment, I don't even have a plan to get the stuff from my workshop to the house because it's just in a too hard basket right now. But it's really tough not having a permanent pair of hands. But and then on any given day, you might go, well, now we're just waiting for glue to dry. So what are you going to do?
Would you, Joey? Would you take on a student or something like that? Like how far are you from Auckland? Yeah, I was going to say, how far are you from Auckland again? An hour and a...
It's an hour and a half, but the next closest city to me is Whangarei, which is
Whangarei would have trade schools and things, wouldn't it?
I'm sure they do. It's just me having to get off my butt and look for it and put the... Because I'm like really standoffish now about offering, because I don't want to get tied into something. Once you sign a contract with an employee, you're kind of tied there. Like, you don't really just get to sack them. It's not something that you can do. And I'm really nervous about that. But with a student, you can definitely have, and anyone really, as a part-timer, you can, like Pat, you were saying, have a much more casual agreement with somebody about...
Cordon off a tiny portion of your workshop. Let someone use it as their space so that when you have a quiet time, you're like, all right, fuck off, go work on your own piece now. Yeah. That's my great position right now, is Clancy's got heaps of work for himself. Yes. I'm like, all right, I'm good for the next half day, so just, do your own thing. Yeah. That's really ideal. Yeah.
It's a good way to do it.
Because literally you might just need somebody for 5 minutes to flip a tabletop.
He just has like a running tally and just adds it to the tab.
Yeah.
That's a really good way.
Yeah.
And clients-wise, where are most of your jobs coming from? From architects or private residential, interior
I've only really
designers?
recently started doing more architectural stuff. I mean, I've always wanted to. I feel like there's a bit of an allure to, or it feels like a slightly higher profile job sometimes. It's a totally different relationship. Like, I'm not seeing the client. Everything goes through layers and layers of communication, which I don't love. It makes everything slower.
The grass is always greener, hey?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways I can charge them, what I'm worth, which is better. Better than what I can necessarily charge a private client. But the vast majority of my work... Wage. Yeah, exactly. Vast majority of my work is just word of mouth, private residential clients, and the odd bit of like, that's my compressor, sorry, it'll go off in about 30 seconds.
Jeez, I can't even hear it. If mine went off, you'd know about it.
So private residential, word of mouth. I do some, I post on Instagram and I update my website about once a year, and that's about the extent of my marketing budget.
You're good though. You're pretty active on Instagram.
I go up and down. Yeah. I mean, when you contacted me, I was like, shit, I should post some stuff. I haven't done it for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you are quite heavily into the design side of things.
Yeah.
Is that something that because it sounds like you wouldn't have had too much of an influence growing up with furniture design. So that's something that you've presumably taken on yourself and worked out yourself. Is that something that you have just picked up along the way, or have you had someone help you out?
No, I mean, I haven't had any formal tutoring. The only thing I've done is Bern's amazing course, which everyone should go do. Bern Chandler.
That's Bern Chandler,
yeah. But no, I've always felt had a bit of a complex, because, not a complex, but like, I don't have any formal training. I don't have any design training. Don't actually have a great literacy around other designers, historical furniture. I just don't have that background. And sometimes I'd really like to. I need to I don't know, give Julian Glencross a bottle of whiskey and make him take me through the history of furniture or something. I just need a little background. But so I almost had like a bit of an antagonistic idea of design early on. My whole ethos was shaped around like, what's the simplest thing I can do? It was really function over form. But as my skills increased and I developed what I liked, I guess I've just kind of developed my voice a little bit. But it's really hard to say where it came from. I often find that I'll just look at a piece that I've drawn up on SketchUp and go, nah, that's not right. Or I'll try and design something super boxy and like really linear, and then something in me is like, no, I've got to put a little taper there, got to put a little curve there. And I think that's just from, I don't know, it's just somewhere in me seeing, it's just from, seeing all of your guys' work, seeing your stuff, Bryan, and, and there's like, I don't do a lot of curvy stuff, and I've always felt like that wasn't my realm, but I think it really wasn't my realm because I didn't have the skills. And as I developed the skills, I don't know, Adam Markowitz posted something the other day of some beautiful little curvy object, and I'm like, shit, I'd really like to be able to figure out how to make that kind of stuff. And that's not in my wheelhouse right now, but I think I'll get there at some point.
You did that table for the jeweler, right? That looked pretty complex.
Yeah, it was complex and curvy in terms of bent lamination, but it didn't have much in the way of like organic shaped curves,
3-dimensional,
which is something. Yeah, correct. I mean that piece really pushed me. It was a wonderful piece to build.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I agree with you though. I think 3-dimensional curves are a step beyond a curve. So I think
I can't build them in SketchUp, so I can't build them.
So they're not possible.
I had to teach myself
physically impossible.
I had to teach myself how to do that when I took on the spiral staircase job. Yeah. And I was like, I need to learn how to make like a ridiculous shape in SketchUp. So I did that, and then, but I was going to say like, woodworkers typically start with a box, jewelry box or something, and then a coffee table and everything square, and then you start putting like a rounded end on a table, and then you start going, how do I extrude that shape into like the end of a coffee table, and the whole thing is like a pill shape or something like that. And then, or like you did, Pat, you've got that kind of barrel coffee table thing, and it's kind of like it's curved, but it's an extrusion of a curve. You know what I mean? And then
it's all actually made of straight bits.
And then there's a whole step above that, which I don't know. There's this piece called the Maelstrom cabinet. Have you seen? And it's like carved, 3-dimensionally carved. It's like giant blocks of timber, and it's sculpted. And
it looks almost like a wave or a storm on the front face. Yeah,
that's right. And that's just a whole step above. Like, you have. I don't even know where you start with something like that.
Right. And I think like right now, if I did a piece like that, it would be like it wouldn't feel like it would fit with the rest of my stuff. But also, my taste and like when I say I think I found a voice, it's just evolving. Like as my skills change. Who knows? Like I might just end up doing all curvy stuff all the time at some point. Right now I'm doing a lot of, linear dovetail stuff, but it's just kind of whatever I'm doing at the time.
Like we've chatted about it before with Joseph Walsh's stuff. When you see his early stuff before he got into bent lam, you got to really search hard to find photographs of the internet, because I think he's tried to have them all taken off.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I've seen some and I'm like, oh no, it's a different Joseph Walsh. That's not the guy. So I think it is like it's one of those things. Once you start getting into it, like Nick Padula as well, you see a lot more bent lam kind of coming into his work. But I always think there's a tricky balance. I like linear things. I like pointy edges, and maybe that's just my design aesthetic. But I feel as well trying to find your clients once you get into really tricky bent lam stuff that are prepared to pay for it. You're really looking at a very small niche. Like I find I have to dial back a lot of my designs to try to appeal to a broader base. If I want to sell things, like maybe this was another question I was going to ask you. So you're recently a dad with a 1.5-year-old. My thinking has totally changed with my business since I've had kids. I now instantly look at what can I sell this piece for. It's always the financial aim first, as opposed to what creative juices can I tap into with this. Like I'm looking at it going, that joint's going to take a long time to cut. Maybe I'll just miter it. And
that's really interesting.
Do you find the same thing? Like, have you found it's driven a business perspective? Joey's laughing, so Joey feels it.
Definitely. Recently, I'll often have conversations with clients, and I'm just reflecting now that I do exactly what you're talking about. Where I'm like, how can I make this really interesting for myself? But what that means is that I end up spending an extra week that I'm really not paid for on a piece that And just this morning, I started designing a dining table. It's the first time I've done it, that I'm really looking at a retail model, like seeing if I can make a dining table for like $1,500, $2,000. I've got a couple retailers who I've chatted to, make it super simple. So I'm not having to spend a week doing hand cut mortise and tenons.
Yep.
Just, chatting to a designer recently, I feel like I'm sometimes making, like, maybe it's to try and prove myself, but I feel like I'm making furniture for furniture makers. Like, I'm doing stuff that I'm really interested in, and I'm doing stuff that I want people to be like, oh, that's tricky. But I was chatting to an architect. He's like, the vast majority of the people, they're like, oh, I want a table, but they don't really care in the same way that we do. They're like, oh, I want it to be pretty or whatever, but they're not going to look at the detail of the stuff that we are. And it's great to have those skills. And I feel really proud of, the way I've been able to develop some of those skills. But you've got to ask yourself, who's it for? Because right now I feel like it's for my ego. It's just for me, just wanting to, not just ego, but like the joy of doing it. So I'm kind of challenging myself to make a piece that's like for the Gen Pop.
But by challenging yourself and increasing your skill set, I think the real benefit that you have of that is you're making better quality pieces.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're making them faster.
Yes.
So you're making them faster. You're able to charge
a lot more than I used to.
Yeah, you're able to charge more, make it faster, and it's going to be better. So I think only by really exploring new skill sets can you learn things like that. But I'm just, from a design perspective, I just find as though I'm now simplifying things down.
Absolutely. And like that's a choice we can make, having developed those skills, and you can put in fussy technical stuff, but you don't necessarily need to.
I'll just put my 2 cents in on that, because I 100% agree with that. When you first start, or certainly when I first started, it was all about how can I make this the most complex piece and show off that I know I'm like God with wood, and then it's like probably it took about a year after my son was born, and before that I read an interview or saw one of the few interviews with Craig Thibodeau from CT Fine Furniture, and he makes these incredible veneered puzzle boxes, and started off doing just incredible veneered furniture. And someone asked him essentially what drives you, why do you make this furniture, why do you do it? And he just said, to pay for my kids' food. And I was like really shocked at the answer, and I was like,
sell out.
That really made me feel like, it's really cold and analytical view of it's just a job. But then as soon as my son was born, and I'm in the workshop, and I'm like, I don't want to spend 4 hours cutting hand cut dovetails on drawers. I think
it's 4 hours you're not spending with your kid.
Let's make it simple. I
was chatting to Bern Chandley after his course, and it was just a throwaway comment, but we're chatting about, how the businesses were going, and he's like, some stage I might just go and be a chippy. And I was just, and he was like, he wasn't being completely facetious, but he's like one of the most skilled woodworkers I know. Yeah. But, we got to recognize that we're making choices, these artistic choices which fulfill ourselves. It sometimes takes away from, time with family, I guess.
Oh, that's funny, man, because I've just been talking to my wife about this. I'm like, for the money I'm making currently, I'm struggling. Like, maybe I should just go and dig holes.
Exactly.
And then come home.
I could work retail and make better money than I'm making.
So, as someone who's on the outside from where you guys are, I hear these stories from people in different fields, and it often bothers me because I hear you guys talking like this, and I'm trying to get into what you're doing.
Earmuffs, Robin.
I've got these rose tinct glasses that you've clearly at some point taken off along the journey. When I left my rental in Tasmania, my landlord was just leaving his Sparky business to just go be essentially a pencil pusher, because that's all he wanted. He said, I'm done being an entrepreneur. And I was saying to him, as I'm trying to... Is there a case then to be that you need to separate your woodworking? So you still love woodworking, but you've got to separate the business woodworking from your woodworking. or at that stage, are you just out of time? There's just no time for your woodworking anymore.
I mean, I think that there's a similar conversation that I remember reading about with guys who are running studios and bands and stuff. It was like, you got to look at your business as like, is this a business or is it a passion project? Because sometimes we blur the line, or we're like, we're buying machines that we're like, we think we can justify, but really it's just kind of because we want to play with them. I mean, that being said, and all of this kind of cynical talk, Robin, like, it's been a long time since I've had an employer, and I don't think I would like that. I know I wouldn't like it. Like, I value what I do so much, the freedom. I'm really passionate about it. And so, yeah, while I joke about doing something more lucrative, like, this is absolutely what I should be doing. And I don't want to dissuade anyone from doing it. You know, I sometimes have to take on jobs that aren't super glamorous, and that's just like, that's no worse than, you know, that potentially pay more.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
No
Like dressing timber for somebody, for a backyard woodworker who doesn't have the machine to do it, and you're like, oh yeah, I can make $100 an hour doing that. Sure,
yeah. You're in your workshop. You work like, I'd still rather do that than go work. You know, I've worked retail. I've worked for other people. Like, I don't want to do that. Sure, I'd like to make a bit more money, but like, this is where I should be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robin.
That's the ultimate.
Thanks for walking it back, Pat.
That's the ultimate where I came back after. You know, it's all very well to say, I could go get another job and earn money, but you are also stuck at the whim of somebody else. And currently, my family just 35 meters away in the house.
Yeah.
And I could go and take 5 minutes and go give them a hug and, you know, whatever. Put a piece of puzzle
Both my parents
in their puzzle. And what's that?
My parents were high school teachers, and they were in a pretty tough high school and didn't love it. And so my like impression of their work life growing up was that it was not particularly pleasant and not super fulfilling. It, you know, different aspects of it were really fulfilling for them. They both really cared about teaching, which is probably why they had such a rough time, because they're in a school where no one else did. Or like, that was the impression I got. But it was just like, work seemed like a brutal thing. And I'm in a position where my work is not. Like, yeah, I have long, long days and I'm not exactly making minimum wage, but I also I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm hating what I'm doing. And so I think that's the trade-off that I've made, and I'm in a lucky position to be able to do that. Not everybody is financially. There's a different equation for everybody, but the relationship that I saw that they had with work shaped how I feel about work, for sure.
Now talking about design earlier, can I talk about one of your more recent pieces? That's dining table.
Yeah.
And it's got those sort of cross sections where you can sit what look like wooden dishes. Yeah. I must say, my first thought was, I've seen that before. I vaguely remember that from a recent event that we just did. That design. Where did that come from? Where did that thought come from to make the underside of a dining table so functional?
Years and years ago, I remember seeing some work of a Melbourne sculptor, a sculpturist. he works in metal. His name's Neil Taylor, and he does these phenomenal, huge grids of steel. He also does these delicate little things out of gal wire, which are like just these tiny worlds of like, it's kind of futuristic and old-fashioned at the same time, just little tiny pieces of wire all joined together. And I just so drawn to that design. So there's a giant piece in Heidi that's made of like welded steel. Brian, do you know that piece?
I know the piece, yeah.
That's Neil Taylor.
Yep.
So a couple of years ago, I designed a piece similar to this for a client. They wanted a dining table for a big light-filled space, and they kind of liked the idea of a base that was like a solid plinth base, but they wanted to be able to see through it. So I threw a grid down there. Now, there's problems with putting a big plinth under a dining table because people's legs hit it and stuff. So I had to shape that to change the ergonomics so that, you know, it would be a functional 12-seater. 10-seater. And the little platforms that sit within the grid, that was just a bonus. It's like if you're going to have all of these horizontal cross members, it just seemed like a waste not to like integrate some playful little item into there. But, you know, I guess like what you were saying with those curved pieces, Brian, like it's going to be a tough piece to sell. It was really built for an exhibition. It's very expensive. I need it to be somewhere. I think it would be better off like maybe in a winery or a gallery than it would be in someone's house. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect, like, realistically, while I don't want it in my house, I also don't really expect it to sell anytime soon.
Yeah.
I'm not. Okay. My business isn't set up like that to sell pieces on spec that are worth, you know, I'd need about 16K to make that piece again.
Yep.
It's a lot
I
of
learned
work.
that lesson myself. Same thing. Try to build a couple of pieces on spec and then try and spend more time trying to sell it than it took to make it.
Yeah, I mean, and I really wanted to make it, and I'm glad I did. But, you know, I'm probably just going to give it to someone on loan, to be honest.
I get that 100%, because what you did was you had this driving kind of mental image, and you needed to get it out of you. And otherwise, it's going to bug the shit out of you, because you just needed to experience it from A to B and work the details out practically, right? And then you say, I made that thing, and now I can shelve it.
Right. Otherwise, I was just going to keep trying to foist it on other clients who didn't want it.
That's right. Now the idea's gone, you've done it, and then you can go to someone, look, I've done this, but let's do it something slightly different. You know, it's like you can still play on the idea, but you don't now have to force it down someone's throat.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad I did it. It was fun. It was fun. I just put aside an entire month, didn't do anything else,
That's
just
awesome.
Smashed it out. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
I haven't done something like that for a while. I was just thinking about it the other day, actually this morning. I was like, man, I've just been so focused on client jobs because I've got to get paid that I just haven't allowed myself to even wander and think and just let your brain drift a bit and just create some shapes or what would happen if I did this or that. And I haven't even, I have not got any like potential sketches of like my dream kind of things to build. I haven't done anything like that for years. And,
if I didn't have a deadline from that exhibition, I never would have got it done. Like I needed something to push me to do it. Otherwise, it just would have sat. Just there's no impetus. There's nothing forcing me to do it. So
it's a good case for signing up to an exhibition or somehow being involved in something like that.
Yeah, end up with a piece of furniture that you can't sell. Great idea.
It's definitely a piece of furniture for furniture makers. Like I remember seeing you making the circular trays, the inserts, and the way that you had done the rebate in the bottom. Like I'm like any client will never appreciate the amount of work that you went to make that out of a solid base instead of
just like a 10-step process instead of just gluing a chunk of wood on the underside.
Exactly, yeah. But it is a standout piece, and if you are, if you're saying you're trying to get into a bit more architectural work, to have that as a folio piece and an advert for your business, would you rather spend your time and I don't know how much material? A couple of grand, $2,000.
Oh, that was a great thing. Series gave me the material because
even better.
Exhibition.
So it's literally your time
just my time for a month
versus totally spending money on advertising or something like that. This is a way better way to spend your time. Yeah,
I wanted to make something that was Again, I'm not super literate with a lot of historical furniture. I haven't seen anything quite like that. Like a lot of stuff, we were chatting this morning about that trestle table.
Yeah,
Brian, that design is everywhere.
Yeah,
that's
just
not
the
my
Nakashima.
design.
It's so funny. Just to put it in perspective, there, the table that Patrick posted today, it was like a little knockdown thing. Is it?
Yeah.
And pillar table, knockdown pillar table, and it's kind of a George Nakashima style. If you look over my right shoulder,
yeah,
it's the same fucking table. It's a bit chunkier and a bit beefier, but like you said, there's only so much you can do with that table. Exists for a reason. It's easier to get chairs around it because legs don't get in the way. There's only so many ways you can do a leg design.
It's interesting.
It just works really well.
Just want to hark back. The conversation has mentioned quite a few times this idea that you can't sell that to clients, or that, or the client doesn't care that you spent 20 hours making these little dish trays to go underneath the table. Like they just see a a little tray, and that's it. Like, okay, fine. And earlier, Pat, you mentioned like the vast majority of people just don't care; they don't see it, and it's so true that even myself, when I go through, as furniture makers, we all, I'm sure, whenever you see a piece of furniture somewhere, you just give it an extra 10 seconds once over. If you're going through a shop, you just go, oh yeah, what they do, how they get around that little tricky join. Oh yeah, they just got screws up underneath. But the client, like any normal people, walk through the shop and they just go, oh, I like the shape of that table. Is it the right size? Yeah, let's buy it. They don't give a shit how it's put together. And so the client then says, oh, look, we can't, that table isn't in the right size. I'll find someone to make something similar for us. So that one in the shop was like $400, and then we come back with them for like a $4,000 version of it. And they're like, what the hell I just want something that's like that one. And you go, oh yeah, but we put dovetails in it, and it's got mortise and tenons, and it's got this whole thing to allow the expansion and contraction of the wood. And they're like, I think we'll just go and get that one from the shop, because like they don't give a shit. And so that's coming back to that same, like, just simplify your design so you don't have to fucking deal with the client who says, why is it so much? Like, I'll just go get that one.
You got to walk that line between, obviously, like, we don't want to put anything out there that's low quality. We want to make sure the pieces we make last, make sure the joinery is really sound, it's not going to break up. But if you're putting, you got to look at the features that you're putting into a dining table and saying, is that for me or is that for the client?
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of stuff that's just for me.
However, true. I do wonder if it comes down to the sale of it, though. Because if in your scenario, Joey, I can make you the table for $4,000. Or you can get a Joey Chalk one-of-a-kind,
that's right,
specifically built, and you I don't want to say ham it up, because it's legitimate, but if you give them something to tell their friends about why that table is so special, that's where you can do it.
And that's just a different clientele. Like, you just have different, like Bryan mentioned earlier, like, we had probably all come across that client, and you can tell pretty straight away that they're serious about getting something unique and they're going to pay for it. And you've got that other tire kicking client who's just like, look, can you just whip something together for me because I can't find the right size thing? And you can tell the budgets are completely different ends of the spectrum, and you treat each one slightly different.
Yeah, I had a client come to me recently, and they're like, "Oh, we really like the tables that you've made that have the joinery that the legs come through the top, but the design wasn't quite right." And so I made sure they were serious. I got a deposit and did a bunch of design work. I was like, "All right, well, I'll just design you something from scratch that incorporates. It's going to have that joinery that is nowhere else in any of my work or any other work. Design something just for you." And it's been a long process, but I mean that stuff's joyful. Again, it's not profitable, but it's joyful.
Yeah.
It's marginally profitable.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea of what you said. I don't know if I would have the balls to take a deposit before I knew what I was going to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably heard that from Bryan ages ago.
No,
and it was because I'd already been back and forth with them a couple of times and given them some sketches, and I knew that to design something from scratch was going to be a pretty big investment in time. And I was like, look, if you end up buying the piece, I'll just subtract that, that design fee would be in there anyway. But I'm going to spend a couple of days probably designing stuff, going back and forth, which I did. I spent a lot of time, and they were fine with it. It wasn't exorbitant either. I think I only charged them like $400 or something. But he was a designer. They're a serious client, and But I also I knew, because we'd gone back and forth a bit, I didn't want to be in a position where I'd spent 4 days designing something that they were like, "Hey, I'm sorry, it's just not quite right."
Yeah.
Because I felt like I tend to sink into my designs and spend heaps and heaps of time doing them, and you're not going to get paid for that half the time.
I see. I think the whole industry would be better off if everybody took that blanket approach and said, you want a bespoke piece, or you want to take one of my pieces and modify it? Here's a design deposit. If there's enough hours in it for you.
A design deposit, different. Like, I mean, I wasn't sure if Pat was meaning a full deposit for the whole job, and he didn't know what he was going to make.
It was a design deposit. It was a couple $100 design deposit.
That's different. And I would absolutely. I would.
But do you know what I mean? Like even if every single maker charged $300 to $500 as a design fee at the start, it stops clients shopping around people's designs. And if you say to them, okay, like maybe you come up with an agreement where you pay a bit more, say $500 or $600, and then they own the IP on that design and they can take it to whoever they want to make it. If they want to go cheaper, they can take it to somebody who's just out of trade school. If they want you to make it, they have to pay your fee. But then at least everybody's getting paid.
Yeah, I like that. I charge for my design time, but I don't get it up front. I just build it into the cost of the piece.
The vast majority of my work is like that. It's only occasionally that I charge a design fee.
Yeah, and the problem with it is that Bryan will so quickly tell me is that when you don't get a job, you just spend 3 or 4 hours drawing something that you don't get paid for. And here's a good example. And this is the worst kind, because if someone comes to me wants a kitchen, and I'll go, okay, I'll look at the pictures and decide if I even want to know about it. And then I'll say, okay, I'll start drawing something up. This particular one, they wanted all solid timber, slatted shelf, open kitchen, so no doors, just all like giant like workbenches essentially. And so there was like 400 slats in this thing, and so I priced it all up and drew it all up, spent probably 2 days on it, and then they just disappeared after they saw the cost of it. And it's like, I don't know how else you do it apart from what Bryan said was, here's a design fee up front. I should probably do that in the future, because that's just my stupidity, I think.
And definitely market it to them as saying it's refundable. Even 50% of it's refundable, you know. And if you still need the money, of course you can up the cost to increase your margin in it. Like that's not that big a deal. But just the marketing of it to a client is, if you go with me, then you're going to get something back.
That's a good idea. I'd never thought about that actually. Like, hey, I'll do the design. You can take it or leave it. And if you get me to do it, then you get 50% off the design fee. That's pretty cool.
So, Pat, what's the next project you're working on?
I'm doing some work with architects out of Melbourne, Studio Edwards.
This brightly coloured madness.
Yeah, so the job is for a creative agency called Today, and they do a bunch of kind of like social enterprise creative work for social campaigns and stuff. It's a big organisation. They're developing a new workspace in Melbourne, in Richmond, and they needed 20 or something tables. So Studio Edwards designed these plywood tables that have scaffold steel bases, and they wanted this really specific finish which had like a high tone and low tone on the grain. So like on like radiata plywood, the soft grain goes one colour and the hard grain goes another colour. And so I worked for a long time sort of developing that finish for them. And now I'm building a bunch of tables, and like, you know, it's steel scaffold bases. It's not exactly, you know, what I would necessarily choose for a table, but there's a bunch of them. The space is kind of industrial. It's really bright. So I'm working on that, and I've also got a private hardwood black butt dining table that I'm doing, and a few other jobs I need to, for existing clients that I need to kind of draw up and keep moving forward on as well. But right now, this Today project is taking up, they keep throwing more bits at me, which is lovely from a financial perspective, but it just kind of, it's just the job that keeps on giving and keeps on growing.
How do you deal with that? And in fact, I don't even know if we've talked to Bryan at all about this. Like, if you have, that's a pretty major job, right? You've got 20 tables and you've allowed for it to take 10 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, can you make us another 5? But you've already allocated the next month after that to your next job.
Yeah, I have had an embarrassing situation with a private client where I really should have made this black butt dining table a long time ago, but this Today job just keeps getting pushed out, and they have, you know, it's architects on architects. There's layers of bureaucracy there, and they've got deadlines. But I actually have, well, I've kind of stopped working on the Today job for about 2 weeks, and I'm just have to finish this blackwood dining table, and I'm still fitting it within the schedule because there's some other piece of the architecture job which is on hold. But yeah, I had to put me in a position where I had to tell this really lovely client that, like, hey, I'm really sorry, but I haven't done this table, and here's why, and I'm going to get it to you as soon as I can. I don't like doing that at all. No. And it's, partly on me. I have a really hard time saying no to things. I'll take on all kinds of random stuff that I shouldn't.
Yeah.
And, when they're offering me new work, I need to be, in this position right now where I need to be like, yes, I'll do it, but I'm not doing it within this work schedule. I'm going to get these tables done for you, and then we can cost and talk about the next step.
Yeah, good plan.
And that doesn't always work for them, but, I've done enough work for them now that they want me to do it. So, yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask about the tinting the different parts of the wood? How does that work?
I'm reluctant to. I hate to say this. I'm reluctant to fully tell the story behind it because it's a very unique process, and I'm hoping to utilize it myself in a bunch of other work.
Have you worked this out?
Yeah.
Did you work this process out yourself?
More or less, yeah. So they came to me with a sample that someone had done, but they'd done it on a different type of timber, and when we tried it on plywood, it didn't work at all. So I kind of had to rejig the whole process. Basically, we're using a combo of oil-based and water-based finishes with a texturizing element as well to raise and lower the grain. It's been a super fun project. None of this video gets used. Anyway, I've got some photos of it on my Instagram and my stories. But really striking result and there are, so much of that research. A bunch of the colours don't work. Some of them work really well. It's such a finicky process. It's been really fun, but very time consuming to get right.
Sounds fascinating. Yeah. So we're going to see it on Instagram.
There were some stories.
I saw some clips of you scraping
your stories.
Yeah. But once these are done in another week or so, I'll post a bunch of really nice photos of them. Yeah, hopefully.
Cool. Yeah. Well, that's a good segue because we are coming up to time now. Talking about Instagram, where can people find your work?
So my company is called Douglas Fur Design. And yeah, I post on Instagram semi-regularly when I'm feeling motivated. So yeah, go check that stuff out. That's about it. That's kind of I have a website, but I just kind of use it as a portfolio. Like I said, I update it once a year or whatever. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good talking to you, Pat. As I alluded to in the beginning of the show, we met Pat at Wood Dust, and that's where we organised this to get Pat on the show. So it's been nice to talk to you in this capacity as well, as opposed to just running around on stage trying to
keep crazy
Jimmy and April in check.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I feel like the four of us could have sat down having a beer and we would have had a pretty similar conversation. Yeah. Like, it just feels like four woodworkers just chatting about business. It's been really good.
Yeah,
it's exactly. All right, mate. Well, take care, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers,
Chat you later.
Patrick. Thank you.
Ya.